Let me know when you're ready, camera guy. All right. So when I first read this story, it's pretty long, and I wasn't sure if I should do a shortened version or cut a part of it out. But I read the first part, and I thought, okay, it's almost over. But then I read the second part, and I recognized it, and it was actually very similar to the story The Master Thief, which was in our other book of folklore, and it's from Germany. So I thought I had to include that second part just so people could hear it and recognize maybe how it's different and how it's kind of related. And it just kind of shows that a lot of these Jack Tales do come from Europe, and they don't just originate in the Appalachians. So this story is Jack and the Doctor's Girl. And also I decided to tell it sitting down, just so I can relax. It's kind of long, rest, lean. So anyways, it's called Jack and the Doctor's Girl. So there's this rich doctor, and he had a really cute daughter. And Jack was into her, and he was taking kindly to her and hanging out with her quite often. And she actually started to like him, but it was apparent that the doctor didn't like Jack. And Jack's father went and talked to the doctor, and the doctor told Jack's father that Jack was too poor to marry his daughter, and that he came back with $1,000 if he could earn $1,000 that he could marry his daughter. So Jack was determined. So he took off one morning looking for work, and he looked everywhere, and he didn't find any work, and he kept looking, asking for jobs, and nobody had any jobs for Jack. Well, he kept wandering, and he sort of became lost, and he's in the wilderness now, and it starts raining, and Jack doesn't really know what to do. He keeps wandering on, and then finally he sees a light in the distance, and so he walks towards the light, and it turns out it's this little cabin up against a mountainside. So he knocks on the door of a cabin, and an old lady answers, and she says, "Who there? I'll be." And, "I'll be, who there? What do you want?" And he says, "Well, can I come in? It's raining out there, and I don't really know where I am." And she says, "You can't come in here. This is a highway robber house." See, well, I didn't understand why this old lady is answering the door and why she lives with highway robbers, but I guess that's besides the point. So her and Jack are arguing, and she doesn't want Jack to come in, but he really wants to come in. And the argument isn't really resolved. He just comes in, and he goes to sleep on some hay, and he's just laying there sleeping, and the highway robbers come home, and they're emptying their loot out of their bags, and all of a sudden they hear snoring, and they look over, and Jack's asleep. And they say to the old lady, "Who's that?" And she says, "Well, he just came in and went to sleep." And so they decide that they're going to kill him, but she says, "Well, you can't kill someone when they're asleep." So they wake him up, and they say, "What are you doing here?" And he says, "Well, I was lost, and I really needed to sleep, and I was out in the rain, and I was cold, so I just went to sleep here." And they said, "Well, we're going to have to kill you." And he said, "Why would you kill me? I have nothing except the clothes on my back." And they said, "Well, all right, do you know anything about stealing?" And Jack says, "No, not really, And they say, "Well, there's this farmer with 3 oxen, and if you can steal an oxen from him, we'll let you live." And he says, "Well, I'll try my hardest." And so the next morning he wakes up, and just hanging there on a peg happens to be a rope, and he grabs it. And so on his way out with the rope, he's walking, and he sees the farmer down the road, down yonder. And then he sees on the road there's this tree sort of hanging over the road. So he climbs up in the tree, and then he hangs the rope like around his arm and around his neck. I'm not sure how he did this without actually hanging himself, but somehow he does it with the rope around his arm and his neck, and he puts the jacket over his arm so the farmer can't tell, and then he's hanging there from the tree with his neck like this. So the farmer comes along, and he sees this boy who's apparently dead hanging from the tree. And the farmer starts talking to himself, and he says, "Oh my gosh, what is this? The highway robbers must have killed this boy. It may be somebody from my community. I better go grab some people and figure this out." So he leaves one of his oxen there, and he takes off back to the town. And, well, he comes back, and he thinks he's at the spot where the oxen were, but he can't find them, and he's with this huge crowd of people. And meanwhile, Jack's back at the cabin with the oxen, and the highway robbers tell him he did a good job, and they give him $300, and they say, "Well, do you want to try this again? We heard that the farmer is going to be going to market the next day." So Jack says, "Okay." And so this morning he wakes up, and on his way out he sees a lone shoe, a woman's shoe on the ground, and he says, "Well, that could come in handy." So he grabs the shoe. And so he leaves with the shoe, and then he sees the farmer coming down the road with one of his oxen. and he throws the shoe in the middle of the road. Well, the farmer comes up to this shoe and he says, wow, this is a nice shoe. I could sure use this for my wife, but it's kind of pointless just having one shoe. I would need a whole pair for my wife to wear these over the winter. So he just leaves the shoe on the ground. It's useless to him, and he takes off down the road more. Well, Jack runs out and he grabs the shoe and he takes a shortcut and he runs forward and throws it on the ground. And the farmer comes up to the shoe and he says, oh, I'll be, here's the other shoe. And he doesn't notice it's the same right foot shoe, and he says, well, I better go back and get the other shoe. So he grabs this shoe and he ties his oxen, I don't want to, drag it all the way back down the road. So he ties his oxen and takes back off to grab the shoe. Well, he comes back and his oxen are gone, and, this farmer's just starting to go crazy. He's talking to himself, his oxen are disappearing, and, well, Jack goes back with the second cow, and he takes it to the old cabin, and they give him another $300, and they say, well, there's one more left. You want to try again tomorrow? And Jack says, sure, why not? So he wakes up in the morning, and he takes off. This time, nothing in hand. He doesn't really have a plan. So he sees the farmer walking down the road, and he kind of runs up in the brush, and he starts making noise, and he starts mooing, moo, moo. And the farmer just starts going, what is that? And he thinks, oh, that's where my cow went. No one stole my oxen. They must just be up in the brush. I lost them. And so Jack's up there stamping around, making noise in the brush. He's like, moo, moo. And then this part kind of makes me think of, I think it's in Scooby-Doo, where they're running from the bad guy, and they'll go in one door, and he'll run in that door, and they'll be coming out the other door, and it just kind of goes on like that. And so Jack's just running around in the brush, just mooing, making a bunch of noise with this farmer chasing him around. And finally the farmer gets stuck, and Jack grabs the last oxen, and who knows what happened to the farmer, but I think he might have been schizophrenic or something, and just kind of going crazy. Where's all my oxen and stuff? So Jack takes the last oxen back to the highway robbers, and you think, well, he needs $1,000 and he's only got $600. Well, luck be had, this time they give him $400 for the last one. So he's got his $1,000, and now starts part two. He takes the money back to his father and he says, Father, I earned the $1,000. Now I can marry the old doctor's daughter. Well, the father's the relay man. I think the doctor's father the doctor doesn't even want to talk to Jack. I think he just has written Jack off. So the father goes and talks to the doctor and says, well, Jack raised this $1,000. Now can we hook up our children? And the doctor says no. He says, well, if Jack is so good at stealing, I'm going to have to test him, because the doctor really wants someone who's good at stealing to marry his daughter. So he this is, it's obvious that the doctor is just trying to con Jack away from his daughter and make sure they don't get married. So he's setting up these impossible tasks one after another. So the next task, he tells Jack's father that Jack has to come steal 12 horses from under 12 men that are at his stable. So Jack takes off determined, even though his father tells him it's pointless. And with him he has a keg of liquor. I don't understand how Jack's carrying a keg, but he is. Those things are huge. And so he tries to go into the barn, and they say, no, you can't come in here. They see that Jack's trying to get him drunk or something to steal the horses. So Jack's just kind of sitting outside, pretending to drink this liquor, hoisting the keg up like, ah! Just, he's faking. He's not really drinking the liquor. And he does this a few times, and, the men are getting kind of cold, and they're looking out there, and one by one they start going out, and they're just, oh, just let me have a little bit of that. And so they start sipping on the liquor, and 5 minutes later they're all passed out. Turns out Jack had put some chloroform in there. So he takes all the horses back to his house, and his father goes to the doctor and tells the doctor, well, Jack got all 12 horses. And the doctor says, well, that's not good enough. He's going to have to try to steal something else. And so the doctor tells him he has to steal the rabbit out of the pot when they're making dinner. How are you going to do that? The family's sitting in there just making dinner, cooking a rabbit up. How's Jack supposed to steal it without them noticing? Well, he starts wandering towards the house, and he sees a larger rabbit, and so he picks this up. This will probably come in handy. And so he comes to the house and he inches the door open and he lets the rabbit inside. And the family sees this rabbit. And seeing as they love eating rabbit, they're cooking a rabbit. They start chasing this thing around the house. You know, another kind of Scooby-Doo theme here. And as they're chasing around the house, they're in the other room. And Jack takes the rabbit out and takes it back home. And the next day the father brings it to the doctor and tells the doctor that Jack has stolen the rabbit. Now they should get married. And the doctor says, well, he has to try one more thing for him to marry my daughter. So he says, he has to steal the sheets from under us while we're sleeping, and all the windows will be locked and all the doors will be locked. So there's no way he'll be able to do this. So Jack takes off. And it seems like all these plans just come out of nowhere. He never is planning on any of this. Like, oh, here's a rope. Oh, here's a shoe. Somehow he's figuring out how to do all this stuff, but something must be going on in Jack's head. But anyways, so it's nighttime, and the doctor and his wife are laying in bed, and then they hear something on the window. And the doctor just kind of starts yelling. He says, if you break that window, I'm going to shoot you. And so there's more knocking against the window, and he's yelling more about shooting his gun. And then suddenly the window breaks, and the doctor pulls his gun out and fires off 3 shots, and then you hear fall from the roof and then like a kerplunk on the ground. And the doctor's wife freaks out, and they're afraid that the doctor just killed Jack. And he's like, I didn't mean to kill him, I just meant to scare him. And so he goes running out the door to hide the body because he doesn't want to get in trouble. And so when he's gone hiding the body, some voice comes from the hallway. It says, I need something to hide the body in. Anything. And the wife says, well, I don't know. We don't have much here. And he says, just anything. And she says, well, will the sheet work? And the person says, yeah. And so she throws the sheet. And then comes the doctor's husband a little bit later through the door, and he's laughing. And she says, what's so funny? And he says, well, it was just a scarecrow with Jack's hat on it. I didn't actually shoot him. And so then Jack took the sheet, and he's back at home. And so the next day, Jack's father takes the sheet to the doctor and says, well, here's the sheet. And, you just assume the doctor's going to come up with more tasks. But then comes the blackmailing. They say, well, we've got Jack's hat with the bullet holes. We've got proof that you were trying to kill Jack. And, the doctor couldn't go to jail, and he couldn't let his reputation be hurt. So he finally agreed. And Jack and his daughter got married. And last time I checked, they were doing just fine.